Hello everyone, welcome to the live stream for Blocks on the iPad. I don't have the list in front of us of everybody who's in now, so we're just going to hang about for a couple of minutes to let everyone tune in who's going to be joining us today to check this new version of Blocks out.
No, we've got Jerry's under the coconut tree.
Oh, Jerry under the coconut tree. Yes, have you got your cocktail, Jerry? I hope you have.
We've got some people from USA,
Hello, hi.
Korea,
Korea, thanks for tuning in. Hungary, okay. Greece, yeah, I love Mythos, my favourite beer.
Italy.
Hi, I also like Peroni.
All over. Nice to see people from the forum as well.
Yes, nice to see everyone coming in from the forum. So, we'll get straight down to it. We will demonstrate Blocks on the iPad. So, this is what it's all about. The iPad. So, the way this demonstration is going to work is we'll kind of, assume that you already have a basic understanding of how Blocks works. And what we're actually going to focus on in this demo is the differences between Blocks on the iPad and Blocks on the Mac. The differences aren't great, but there are some. We've re-engineered some of the way the interface works so that it takes advantage of the smaller screen of the iPad. So without further ado, I will launch Blocks. So this is the start screen. This is the equivalent of, the start window that we have that starts on the Mac where we select our projects from. Elder, who I'm sure needs no introduction, has provided us with a template that he created on the Mac, which I'm going to open up in Blocks on the iPad. So there it is. So this project's it's just open straight up. Gives you an idea of how straightforward it is. So this is a project that's been created on a Mac, opened up on an iPad. So initially the interface looks a bit different, but as I sort of show you how bits and pieces work, a lot of it's going to become very familiar. So the first part of the interface that I like to focus on is this little control at the top. So this control has three main options in it. It can actually be moved as well, because obviously there are times where you might need to get access to something in the middle of the design that you're working on. The first button is a kind of master menu. Now, when you're working on Blocks on the Mac, we have, up in the top left, we have project settings. Top right, we have page settings. Down at the bottom, we have canvas settings. And the settings for the software are scattered amongst the interface. On the iPad, we've brought all these options together, which we can access just at the top here. So there we have project settings, page settings, canvas settings, and of course, the font manager. So I've opened project settings. You can see it's very similar to what we already have on the Mac. I'll just jump through here. Every option from the Mac is here. You get the idea. And I'll open page settings. Basically the same. So all of this should look pretty familiar, with the exception of minor interface changes with switches instead of checkboxes. I'll just close that down. If I head back up here again, I can open the canvas settings. So we have all of our options for the canvas, and we also have our visual impairment filters. Finally, I'll just open the font manager, which is a full screen. We have the fonts installed on the left here. These are Google fonts, which I've installed. The installation process is just the same as it is on the Mac. And local fonts. I just have one local font installed, and again the process of installing those is identical to installing on the Mac. If I return to this top menu, if I touch the LG text there, it gives me the list of breakpoints. So I can now switch between breakpoints quite easily. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that if you've used Blocks. And finally, we have the play button, which of course leads us to preview mode. So preview mode on iPad is a lot different to what we're used to on the Mac. However, if you've used one of our other products, Solus, this will look fairly familiar. I just exit preview moment for a moment, and if I touch and hold the play button, we have preview mode, and we also have preview in browser. Now, I'm not going to use preview in browser because it'll switch over to the browser, but just to make you aware that a touch and hold on the preview button will give us the additional preview options that you're used to having on the Mac. So if I jump back to preview mode, you can see I have all of these views, all of these screen sizes basically, and they're all labeled. Now, these are all synchronized, so when I scroll through, you can see that these are all connected. We can just zoom in, we can zoom out, everything's fairly fluid. Now, when checking a design that you're working on in Blocks, having all of these views open at once may be a touch distracting. So a simple double tap on a view will bring the focus to a single view, and we can kind of go through that view on its own. And if we're happy with that, just double tap it again to return. If I double tap into the empty workspace, it will actually center the current workspace that we have set up here. So adding extra views to this. If I touch this plus button up at the top, we have a list of devices that we can select from to add additional views to the preview canvas. So I'll just touch this iPhone 13 Pro Max, and we have two of those now side by side. Now, if I wanted to say change the size of this one, if I touch this next button, it gives me some editing controls for views. So if I touch another view, those editing controls move between the views. With the editing controls enabled, I can now move this view. And I can also resize it. And because this one's a duplicate, I can also use this little red button to just delete it. Finally, while we're here, we have this little pencil icon. So if I tap that, I'm able to just draw a view based on the size measurements that I put in there. We can also edit the title of views, so you can label these however you want. There we go. So that's preview mode running on Blocks for iPad. Do we have any questions?
We don't have any specific questions just yet, although I have just mentioned that we can send them in.
Yeah.
We've had some comments. Brett said that you've nailed the usability in UX with the preview function.
Oh, fantastic.
Lots of people loving what they're seeing so far, so that's really good.
Excellent.
Someone's asking, is it pencil compatible?
It certainly is, but we'll come to that soon. Okay, I'll get on with where we are. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the block bar. So if you've built a website in Blocks before, the block bar is without a doubt one of the pieces of the interface that you're going to be, coming into contact with all of the time. So these little plus symbols, when we're working with Blocks with a mouse and keyboard on the Mac, aren't always illuminated like they are. Whereas because Blocks has to work with mouse and keyboard and fingers, we've made the decision to keep these available at all times. In fact, I probably should have mentioned earlier that obviously Blocks on the iPad is fully compatible with all keyboard shortcuts and a mouse. So you can get the exact desktop user experience with Blocks on the iPad if you connect a mouse and keyboard to it. But it's also great when you're using your fingers.
Norman, someone's asking which parts aren't working compared to Blocks on Mac.
Which parts?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a few parts that haven't been built into this test version yet. The first and probably most important part is the extension manager. Now, the extension manager is responsible for installing page templates. It's responsible for installing custom blocks and custom bricks. Now, we expect this functionality to be in the final version of Blocks, but we wanted to get this version out to testers as soon as possible, and we've decided to put that functionality to one side so we can focus on the core of blocks before we start using third-party code running within the design environment, just to make sure that we address any core bugs that may still be in the software. So that's one of the key things that is different between this particular release of blocks on iPad in comparison to blocks on the Mac.
Okay, and Elder was asking, he wonders if the Google fonts can be cached on the iPad locally.
That's a good question, Elder. Thanks for putting us on the spot. In this version, no, but absolutely, we can work on that. I don't see any reason why we can't do that. We can get that built into the software. Obviously, you know, the stage that the software is at the moment is everything that we've kind of tried to pull into the software to get it to the point where people can actually use it, to get it tested further. But as you know, the way we develop blocks is we take a huge amount of inspiration and a huge amount of feedback from our community. So we will absolutely do our best to make the experience on the iPad as powerful as and the best it can be. And if that means, you know, adding the ability to install and cache Google Fonts, then we'll absolutely do that. Okay, so back to the block bar. To access the block bar, I'm just going to touch one of the plus buttons. So the biggest difference in the block bar is it is full screen. On a Mac, you may use blocks in a floating window on your desktop, which gives the block bar extra space because the popover can go outside the bounds of the Mac window. However, on an iPad, we don't have that luxury, so we made the decision to make the block bar full screen. And actually, the experience is really quite nice. You get to see all of your blocks covering that entire space on that gorgeous screen. Now, one of the little differences between the block bar, other than the size of it, is the ability to like and favorite blocks. So if you notice up here on the top right, we now have a new button, a little heart button. We touch that, you can see that all of the heart symbols have now been illuminated across all of the blocks. If I just touch one of those, it'll add it to my favorites. And that is the major difference with the block bar. We obviously have search, which functions as you would imagine it to. And if I quickly jump over to the brick bar, again, it's a very similar setup, although the brick bar doesn't open full screen because we have a bit more screen space. So the brick bar is very, very similar to what we're used to on the Mac. We see all of our bricks there. And again, we have the little heart symbol to create the like feature, which we can then touch and add to our favorites. So before we leave the design canvas and start talking about some of the more detailed options, another feature is drag and drop. So if you're using a mouse or a trackpad with blocks on the iPad, you'll be able to drag and drop as you normally would expect to. Grab something, move it, drop it. Obviously on the iPad, it's a little different because if I select something, you know, if we try to drag it to move somewhere, the canvas is also going to scroll. So drag and drop is a touch different if you're working with blocks with your hands. If I touch an item and then just touch and hold, we can then drag and drop. And if you notice, drag and drop, when it's initiated, you'll see a little symbol appear just to let us know that drag and drop is now switched on and we can move the item like so. So that's drag and drop. Now let's get into some of the more detailed controls. So initially, when we had the idea to bring blocks to the iPad, we were going to make a streamed down version of blocks, but it became apparent really quickly that this just wasn't going to be a great user experience. So we've really tried to bring everything that you're used to working with on the Mac over to the iPad. So when you're working on the Mac, obviously we have the canvas in the middle and we have sidebars either side. On iPad, screen space is obviously limited, but we've re-engineered the way the interface works in order to deliver what we think is just as good an experience, if not better. So on this right side, we have symbols which may look familiar. We have the inspector, the page navigator, the layer tree, the class manager, the asset manager, menu manager, code editor, and the notes. So if I just start by opening up the inspector, we can now see we have the inspector controls. We have the ID, the classes field, all of the visibility controls, the text setting controls, which will look familiar. But as well as that, we also have things like global swatches, we have scroll effects, we have animation, we have custom attributes, we have tooltips. In fact, we have all of the controls that you're familiar with from the Mac. Now, when we're working on the Mac, this menu doesn't encroach onto the canvas. So what we've done is we've made the menus that show up the sidebars a lot more flexible. So the first thing you can do is, if you're working on a design and we need access to that right side, we can just simply swipe across the menu to the other side. So menus can just be moved like so. What we also have is the ability to run these sidebars in compact mode. Now, if I simply just double tap at the top here, we now have all of our inspector as a floating panel, so we can work our way through our design. And we can take up as little space as necessary to have the inspector open. If I just double tap that again, you can see it goes back to full screen. If I open the page navigator, and if I swipe this sidebar into this sidebar, they become one, with the addition of this new navigation system at the top. So this lets me easily just toggle through the different menus that we now have combined. If I wanted to separate these, it's just a case of swiping that across. If I wanted to move the entire stack, 2 fingers will move it. And if I have a stack set on either the left or the right, or both, I can toggle the visibility of the stack with this small eye icon down here in the bottom corner. Touching that will hide the menus, but we can still see that these options are illuminated, so we can get access to whatever we need, and then we can quickly turn those back on again. Now, if I open the layer tree and swipe that across, now we've got 3 options. So I guess you could say we could quickly toggle between these to find the part that we're looking for. But what we've also done is, if we touch the title, we can just jump straight to whatever option set we need. So that's the way menus and all of the detailed controls work within the design environment on blocks on iPad.
Norman, I've got a question. Someone's asking, if I built a website on Mac and then I want to modify it on the iPad, is it possible?
Yes.
And when I save it, how does it work? Can I switch from working on my Mac and then on my iPad and then back again on my Mac?
Absolutely. So the way it works is, what you'll need is either Dropbox or iCloud. So what we would recommend is keeping your project on iCloud, and this means your Mac can open the project from iCloud, and the iPad can access, if it has the login details for the same iCloud account, can access the same project. The only thing that you can't do is have projects open at the same time and make edits in them show up in each device in real time. But if you open a project on your iPad, make some changes, then close it down for the day, the next day open it up on the Mac, the changes will be there, and vice versa.
Someone else is asking which framework will be supported by the beta, Bootstrap 4, 5 or both?
Both. So when you start a project, you have access to both. They're both there.
Yeah. And just the last one here, second display support.
Second display support. I'm not sure. You can plug it into a monitor and it will show up on a monitor. I'm kind of hoping that Apple in the next iOS update bring us true full screen monitor support. But yeah, I mean, you can plug the iPad into a monitor and what you see on screen will come up onto a monitor.
Can I just ask you one more?
Yeah.
Rex asking, will you bring some or all of these interface tweaks back to the Mac version? The menus look so good and minimalist.
Yes, I guess so. The thing is that some of this stuff makes sense on an iPad and some of it doesn't make sense on a Mac. Our plan is to unify the interfaces so that things make sense across both without any of the issues caused by the other. We don't really want to kind of do something on the Mac just for the sake of doing it. So if it makes sense to do it there, then we'll most likely do that. I think in the next version of Blocks on the Mac, you'll absolutely see some of the features that you're seeing in the iPad moved across. But the transition will probably be not extreme. It'll be stage by stage because obviously the interfaces are different, but we don't want to kind of change the Mac version too dramatically overnight. I hope that answers that question. So I'll get back on with the demo now. I'll just shut down the inspector. Let's talk about the Asset Manager. So the Asset Manager is part of Blocks, which you're going to use on a regular basis. It's basically the way we manage our images, our PDFs, our zip files, our MP4s, or MP3s, anything that is going to be, any media that you're going to add to your website is going to be added through the Asset Manager, unless, of course, it is a page or project attachment. The Asset Manager can be opened over here on the right side just by tapping that. Again, it's full screen. We have all of our groups. We have the ability to add assets from our local disk. We can take photos with the iPad's camera. We can add from the Photos library. We can add hosted assets, and we can add hosted assets in bulk. If I close that down, another way to activate the Asset Manager, if I select an image and then just touch it again, it brings the Asset Manager up. And then we can select an image and then select the image for the second time, and we've switched the image here. So I'll put that back to the way it was. With regard to the Asset Manager, it's actually quite a touch more flexible in the iPad version than it is in the Mac version, and I'll demonstrate that now. So obviously there are times where it makes sense to have the Asset Manager full screen, but when we're in, say, project settings and we're going to change the logo, we get a micro version now of the Asset Manager where we can add assets and we can add groups and we can make a selection to set as the logo. Next, I'm going to talk about the Class Manager. So classes are a huge part of building websites with Blocks. There's absolutely no doubt if you're not getting the most out of Blocks unless you're using classes. The Class Manager is here as you would expect it to be. We can reorder classes, and if I just touch one of these little settings buttons, I can see I can edit a class, duplicate a class, create a dark theme, and also quickly create the pseudo ones. If I click edit class, you see our class editor. Everything's here from the Mac. Every control. Now, you're probably thinking it looks a bit hemmed in there. If we just double tap anywhere, we can also put that full screen. So this is a new way of accessing the class editor. We even switched that over there. We've now got the class editor as part of our stack. So the class editor is there, the class manager is there. Next, the menu manager. Now the menu manager opens in a modal window. It's not a floating window like the rest of the controls. And the reason we've done that is we feel this part of the blocks system isn't something that we're always tweaking or having to interact with, unlike, say, the class manager or the class editor. So this window is a simple pop-up, and we can do everything that we can do on the Mac here with the menu manager. We also have the code editor, which is full screen. We have syntax highlighting, and we have all of the code input zones that you're used to having on the Mac. And finally, on this right side, we have notes. So if you have a project and you're making some notes, you can store those in there and you can access them with the little notes icon on the side. So before I move on, is there any more questions, Helen?
Yeah, were the guys asking, will there be an iPad Blocks Plus?
That's a good question. Let's just focus on getting an iPad Blocks version first. I think we'll absolutely probably see a Blocks Plus on the iPad, but we just want to get Blocks on the iPad as close, if not better, than what we have on the Mac. And once we get to that stage, I see absolutely no reason why we can't bring in features like WordPress export and some of the other features like the image editor, etc. that we have with Blocks Plus.
Got someone else asking, when I open a project built on the Mac on an iPad, I think there's the possibility to lose some assets, or are they packed up in a file?
This is a good question. So Blocks is a great piece of software when it comes to assets because we give you a range of ways to build projects. You can either host your images in the cloud, you can embed your images in the project, or you can choose to link to them on the file system. Now, if you embed your images in the project, this is just completely seamless. This project here that I've got open, Eldar built and embedded the assets inside, and as you can see, everything's loading fine. If you're loading from the cloud, you'll have a similar experience. Now, if you're running a project that has linked assets that aren't embedded in the project file, if you move the project and the assets onto iCloud, what will happen is when you open the project, Blocks may not be able to make these connections. However, the missing asset manager is built into this version of Blocks, as is the missing font manager. So if you opened a project and assets are missing, Blocks will ask you, can you point us in the right direction? Once you point to those assets, it will reconnect with them and work very similar to moving projects from one Mac to another. Is there any more?
Just someone asked earlier on about the official release date.
Well, yeah, we're not sure about that at the moment. Probably a little bit more on that towards the end. Okay, so let's talk about the left side that we have here. So the first option, this little grid, is going to take us back, I don't want to save those changes, to the project selection. The second option down is an undo button. So if I was to select, touch and hold, move an item, I can then press this to undo. If I wanted to redo, it's a simple case of touching and holding to get the redo option, and Blocks will redo the change. The next option down is freehand mode. So if you're working with a keyboard, you know there's a keyboard shortcut to initiate freehand mode. Whereas if you're working with just your hands and you're on the go, then to be able to switch freehand mode on, really we need a button for that. So we've added that. So there we are, we're now in freehand mode. If I go over and just grab some margin, I can make an adjustment to the margin as you would with a mouse. The next option down is the quick toolbar. Now, this toolbar has been sitting down here at the bottom. You might have noticed that you may not have. We can turn this on and off, and we can obviously also just move it around. Now this is pretty handy if you're working with your hands, because it brings a range of features that typically we would expect to see with using keyboard shortcuts and using the mouse. So obviously the first button will delete. The next button will nudge items up and down. The next will duplicate. And finally the end one will give us the context menu for that item. So we've got clear formatting, reset alignment, we've got the ability to exclude from export, wrap in div container, copy paste. So everything that you'd expect in a context menu when you right click on your Mac, you're going to get in that menu there. And that is the quick toolbar. It's handy. Some of you may use it more so when you're working with blocks with your hands, but if you're working with a mouse and keyboard, you probably find you're more productive using keyboard shortcuts, but it's nice to have the option. I'll turn it off for now. So we've talked a little bit about the flexibility of the interface and how we can manipulate the sidebars and make them way more flexible on the iPad. We also have a workspaces feature built into this version of Blocks. So the workspaces tab is over here on the left. If I just touch that, we get some options. Now, the first option, canvas left, will put the inspector on the right and the canvas on the left. It will zoom it so it fits perfectly on there. And it will even reposition the breakpoint control. So this is a neat, tidy workspace to now start building or editing our site. We can do the reverse of that with canvas right. And we can get something similar to what we have on the Mac with Canvas Center. So with Canvas Center, we now have the two option bars the other side and the canvas down the middle, obviously zoomed so that we can fit it in and see the entire design. And then finally, we have where we started, Canvas Fill. With Canvas Fill, the design canvas is going to occupy as much of the screen as possible, and any of our menus are going to float over the top of it. Yeah.
Elder's asking, how can they know if the element has a class attached?
It's the same way as you would know if you were on Blocks. There we see the class tokens at the top. So just the same way. So if you are working, you've got this minimized, you're working, you're kind of looking, and you can see the classes there, which is the same way you would identify if classes were attached to an item on the Mac. We could probably, I think the layer tree may also include the class names. It does. Just go across there, we can see the class names there on the layer tree. Obviously the layer tree, you can drag and drop and move things as well, but most of the things that are similar on the Mac, I'm kind of not going over. It makes more sense to talk about the things that are different.
Someone's asking in relation to that, is it possible to work on a specific page on the Mac while at the same time working on a different page on the iPad?
Yeah, I don't think it is. The problem there is that the data and the way the connections work between the devices isn't kind of centralized in the sense that there's no server hosting the changes. So that wouldn't work basically in a nutshell. So you would have to close the project on the Mac, open it on the iPad, and vice versa. If you were to open changes and make changes on the Mac at the same time as you were making them on the iPad, regardless of what page you are working on, you would probably, start to lose data there. So the projects should be opened independently. So now we'll talk about Apple Pencil. I know some people mentioned Apple Pencil earlier on. So Blocks has some features that take advantage of Apple Pencil. The first one we'll talk about is just back in preview mode. So if I sort of just go over some blank space, when I want to add a view at a custom size, usually if I don't have Apple Pencil, I'd have to touch the pencil button and I'd have to drag it out and create the size that I want. If you have an Apple Pencil, you don't have to do anything other than just draw onto the canvas. Blocks will recognize the connection with the Apple Pencil immediately, and you can just draw that straight on. There's no need to switch modes or anything like that, which I think is a nice feature. Another feature that's in this version of Blocks, which is unique to the iPad and uses Apple Pencil, is annotation. So with this, we can actually make notes on a website. So imagine you're on the phone to a client, or you're sitting with a client and you're getting direct feedback. We can we can draw things directly onto the website that we know the client likes. And we can also make changes that maybe the client doesn't want. Yeah, the client doesn't want these two boxes either. So this is a handy feature of Blocks on iPad, because we can add these notes, we can toggle them on and off. So if we're on the go and we're meeting a client, or we're chatting to one on the phone or whatever, we can make some notes here, and then we can get back to the office and we can address those. And we can just toggle those on and off with that button at the side. Finally, regarding the Apple Pencil, I'll just add a couple of empty spaces for this demo, because it just makes it that bit easier. This feature is pretty cool. It's still in the works. It's not perfect, but we think when it is, it's really going to be something quite special. And this is the Draw UI feature. We switch it on with this little button here on the left, and now Blocks is in Draw UI, which basically means we can actually draw interface elements, and they will turn from drawings into actual coded bricks. So if I was to draw a square, it will turn into an image. If I do a line with a dot, we'll get a header. If we do two lines with a dot, we'll get a paragraph. And if we get a rectangle with a line, we'll get a button. Now this feature allows us to pretty much build websites with just drawing symbols on the screen. Now this feature is obviously still in the works. It's not perfect, but it's okay. And we're still working on adding new shapes and new recognition to the handwriting, so that we can, build out the library of the types of things that you can actually create with these drawings. So we can do multiple items. So we could draw 4 images. We can add titles to these. And we can also just put some paragraphs on there. So there you go. That's the draw code. You don't have to draw into an empty space. We can also draw directly onto a website. If I just switch it on again, if we wanted to put, say, a title at the bottom of there, just draw a line and a dot and we get our title in. It's pretty cool. We think it's fairly exciting, and the idea of being able to actually draw the interface is just kind of feels a little bit magical. So hopefully some of you are excited by that, because we are. So that concludes all of the stuff with Apple Pencil. Have I got any questions?
Not questions, no, but a lot of positive comments about that. Someone saying, please let us draw an X over elements we don't need.
Oh yeah, so this is actually in there already. I don't know whether it's a scribble. So if we just scribble over something, oh, of course that wouldn't work. This is not tested, this particular feature. There, it deleted eventually. But yeah, we'll absolutely fine tune that and get that working a lot better. Is that everything?
Yeah, just
yeah.
Really positive, yeah. Good.
So we've covered the changes in the interface, we've covered preview mode, we've covered all of the functions that you'd expect to see. Obviously, when you've built your website, the next thing you're going to want to do is export it. On the Mac, we can export, and then we can use an FTP app to upload our built website up into the cloud. The good news is, on the iPad, we can export, and there are a lot of FTP apps available for the iPad. But the even better news is that you won't need to use an FTP app, because Blocks has a publishing feature built right in. So we can build design and publish a website all from an iPad with Blocks for iPad. So if I touch the publish settings, you can see I have a server already preset here. If I click the plus button, we can add new servers. We can have as many servers here as we want stored. Give the server names, put the address of the server, the username, the password, the protocol. We support a few. The path that we want to upload the site to, and we can also set the port number. I select this server and click publish. Blocks will begin publishing my website that Eldar kindly built and gave to me. It'll take a few moments to go up. Hopefully we don't have any internet issues where it cuts off. But there you go. So we've done the whole process. You've built everything. You're on top of Mount Everest. You've just built the greatest website in the world. You can't wait to show your mother, and you think, you know what, I can publish it here, and she can go right there and she can check it out. So we're almost done. Yay! We've uploaded. Let's open the site in the browser. There we go. There's the website, all built in Blocks and then published up into the cloud. So Blocks on iPad has nearly all of the editing features. It has pretty much everything you need to be able to preview and design a website for any screen size. And it also has some cool Apple Pencil features, which we think are going to really kind of change people's perspective of building websites on an iPad. And finally, we have the ability to take any creation that we make on our iPad and upload that to the cloud without leaving the iPad. So I'm happy to answer any more questions that we have.
Someone's just asking, Adrian, please bring this feature to the desktop too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's one thing I can tell you now is that we already have the publishing features built into the next version of Blocks. So they're being tested internally. So the desktop will have publishing features in the next major release, as long as nothing dramatic goes wrong there. But so far, so good. It's 99% sure that that is absolutely going to be a feature in the next version.
Not another question, but just someone mentioning it's really impressive and well done for your hard work. Well done to an amazing team, very professional and slick. So that's very nice. Yes, there's 3 of us here now running this, and it's been a little bit stressful, but it's nice. This version of Blocks has been in production now for over 4 years. We've been back and forward and re-engineered parts and really tried to bring something desktop standard to the iPad. And I think we've done, I mean, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I'm very happy with how it's shaping up so far. And obviously, you know, this is simply the beginning. This isn't even available to test yet. So once we move into the test phase, I think it's only going to get better. I did have a question at the beginning of the live about the prices. Do we know what the prices are?
No, we definitely don't know what the prices are at the moment. It's, you know, we've just got to kind of wait. We're focused more on making sure that this software works the best it can work on the iPad. And for anyone interested, this iPad that I have here is an iPad Pro. It's 2 years old. And obviously Blocks runs pretty slick and very, very fast on it. However, I do have an older iPad, which I'd like to bring over now. I'll just move this one out of the way. So this is an iPad Air. This iPad Air is really old, 8 years old. It's been all over the place. It's been kicked around, thrown in bags and all sorts. And I brought it along because we've worked really hard to try and make Blocks run not only good on the top end Apple iPads, but also on the lower end models too. Now this is a lower end model or a mid-range model from, like I say, 8 years ago, an iPad Air 2. I think it's 8 years, it's definitely old, but it still runs iOS 15, which is the minimal requirement for Blocks on an iPad. If I launch it, we can see, there we go. This is 8-year-old tech running blocks. Everything is looking pretty slick. And we get all of the same controls. Obviously, the interface is a bit more bit smaller, but because of all the flexibility that we have on the interface, I mean, you got to consider that this device is tiny. I mean, it's nothing, and it's running blocks, which is currently running on, desktop computers. This is crazy how we can use this type of software and have it available on such an old device. I mean, I don't even think there's 8-year-old Macs that can run Blocks 4. So I think this speaks volumes as well for how good this software actually works on iOS. So I'm pretty much ready to kind of take any last questions now.
There's a few people asking about Vault CMS. So which bricks that they've bought, will they work? Will Vault CMS work on the iPad?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier in the demo, the extension manager is not built into the test version that we're beginning testing with. But we will be bringing the extension manager to the iPad. Everything that you've bought for Blocks on the Mac will just work on the iPad. You won't need to buy a second version of anything that's specially designed for the iPad. The BEX files that you use on the Mac will also transfer over to the iPad. So there's going to be no extra money needed to be spent here. Everything, your library of all of your extras, all of your custom bricks, your custom blocks, your page templates, everything will just transition over and you'll be able to use them on both the Mac and iPad.
There's a question about tutorials. We've obviously got tutorials for Blocks for Mac. Are we going to have those for Blocks for iPad?
Yeah, I'm hoping Elder can actually help us out a little bit, because most of you probably know that Elder has Blocks Masters, which is an absolutely fantastic resource for anyone learning blocks. We will be working on some of our own tutorials, some of our Blocks Bytes. We'll be focused on that. So you probably see those start to appear in the lead up to the launch of Blocks on the iPad.
Someone asking, can you support Google Drive too?
Google Drive, I'm not sure. At the moment, the only things we've tested with are the local storage of an iPad and the iCloud storage. But guess what? You can try it with the Google storage or with Dropbox and feed the information back to us. We'll absolutely do our best to try and bring it to as many different third-party cloud storage providers as we can.
Yeah.
And finally, I just wanted to say, to answer an earlier question as well, when people were asking about the release date. Although we don't have a release date, we're kind of working towards getting ready to test it. So the test process that we usually go through lasts a number of months. So we don't see the official public release date coming till towards the end of September, early October. But if that's all of the questions,
Yeah.
I'll just move that out of the way.
Being compared to Steve Jobs over here. Just the testing, I think.
Yeah, so the last thing to talk about is testing. I hope you've enjoyed everything that you've seen today. It's been so many years' work has gone into this. It's great to actually finally show it off. We've kind of wanted to keep some things a secret to give you some surprises, and I hope everything you've seen today has changed your perspective of what we can actually do on an iPad. And I think that's only going to increase. I think we're going to see iPads used more and more and more. And I think the next keynote, I'm hopeful that we're going to see some big changes there as well regarding the way iPad works with third-party displays and yeah. But the final thing that I wanted to mention was the testing. So testing is going to start tomorrow. We're going to start sending out test links tomorrow. So you're going to get this, you're going to get an email, and you're going to be able to click a link and install Blocks on your iPad if you have one that's compatible. iOS 15 is what you're going to need. And yeah, you're going to have a lot of fun over the weekend, I hope, and send me lots of bug reports or just let me know how you're getting on with that. So the beta testing will begin tomorrow, and we're going to do a staged testing process. So basically what that means is we're going to test in groups, and the first group will get invites. And what we'll try to do there is get rid of anything that's sort of really obvious, that is breaking pretty much instantly, even though we think we've got everything. We've worked in software long enough now to know that we probably haven't. And there's bound to be that one little bug or that one little problem that's going to cause havoc within the first 48 hours. So we're going to aim to get those types of things addressed early on with a smaller group. And every, say, 3 to 4 days, we're going to increase the size of that group. And we imagine by the end of June, we will literally have it completely open. So anyone, whether you're a Blocks user currently or using some other third-party web design tool, you can come over and you can have a bit of, a taste of the good life of Blocks on the iPad. It's going to be a public link by the end of June, so anyone can come on and start helping us to test. Before I go, I just finally want to say thanks to everyone who's tuned in today. We're a tiny company and we started building this thing way back in 2014, and it's crazy to think of where it's kind of going. I hope what you've seen today is it fills you with optimism for actually, this could be something pretty game-changing eventually, and we're really, really excited to see this new chapter of Blocks being opened with the iPad. So I just want to thank everybody who's shown that support over the years. And we absolutely, I must reiterate that we absolutely haven't forgot about Blocks on the Mac. And we've got some amazing stuff coming for Blocks on the Mac, which we're going to talk about later this year. So yeah, you're going to get a new version of Blocks on a completely new platform, and you're also going to get Blocks 5, hopefully before the end of this year. So thanks for tuning in. And again, thanks for all of your support over the years. And thanks to the team for helping me put this together today. And hopefully we'll speak soon. Bye-bye.